A secret plan has just been revealed, and it was kept hidden to, quote, avoid panic. That's what we are being told right now, that these experiments are happening right now in the environment, in the air, and in the water all around you. And researchers and scientists are keeping it secret because they are worried that the general public is going to, quote, panic if they find out what they are actually doing. So let's get into all this, guys. You can see here that this article just came out. All right, it says researchers quietly planned a test to dim the sunlight, and they wanted to, quote, avoid scaring the public. Hundreds of documents show researchers failed to notify officials in California about a test of technology to block the sun's rays while they planned a much larger sequel, right? This is insane. They're doing this essentially unregulated. They're not even telling the officials. The officials had to come in and shut it down, all right? Check this out. It says a team of researchers in California drew notoriety last year with a experiment on a retired aircraft carrier that sought to test a machine for creating clouds. It says here, but behind the scenes, they were planning a much larger and potentially riskier study of saltwater spraying equipment that could eventually be used to dim the sun's rays, a multi-million-dollar project aimed at producing clouds over a stretch of ocean larger than Puerto Rico. All right, this is absolutely insane. And this is not only going to affect the US, it's affecting other countries as well too. This is what they had planned, and they're already doing this, right? Other companies are doing this, governments are doing this, including our own state governments, federal governments, and even other countries have their own China has an entire geoengineering program, and these countries could potentially influence the weather in the ocean and then influence the weather on land inside the United States or in other places, all right? And this is exactly what they were trying to do. This company was trying to do that has millions of dollars and is billionaire backed. It says the details outlined in funding requests, emails, texts, and other records were obtained by Politico's E&E News raises new questions about a secretive billionaire-backed initiative that oversaw last year's brief solar geoengineering experiment on the San Francisco Bay. All right, they were trying to create a 3,900 square mile cloud creation. It says the initial test was only meant to be a prequel. Even before it began, researchers were talking with donors and consultants about conducting a 3,900 square mile cloud creation test off the west coast of North America. This is insane. How are they allowed to do this? Chile and southern Central Africa, or southern Central Africa, according to more than 400 internal documents obtained by E&E News through open records request to the University of Washington. All right, it says at such scales, meaningful changes in clouds will be readily detectable from space, said the 2013 research plan from the University Marine Cloud Brightening Program. All right, and this article just released today, all right, Sunday, July 27th. So this is a ongoing thing, right? This is just one company that they caught doing this, but it's happening all over the globe. It's government funded, it's billionaire funded, it's happening all over. Here's some of their documents from them. It says an initial limited area field study would involve establishing multiple parallel sea salt aerosol plumes on multiple platforms traversing a region of the minimum size necessary to observe a significant change in cloud brightness. This is estimated to approximately be 100 kilometers times 100 kilometers. This experiment, the multiple plumes would disperse and create a single broad perturbed area downwind. It says at such scales, meaningful changes in clouds will be readily detectable from space using current satellite sensing technology alongside surface and aircraft observations to capture aerosol and low cloud properties. All right, so this is insane. And they were using tons of ships, even old aircraft carriers, to release these salts and these chemicals into the air to block out the sun. All right, imagine a blobular cloud 3,900 miles, square miles. That is absolutely insane, right? That is bigger than some states. It'd be like entire states just being blocked out from the single cloud pattern that they can create. Essentially, it's not actually clouds, but they're creating these artificial type clouds and releasing things like sulfur dioxide into the air as well too, to block out the sun. All right, so this is insane. And while this is going on too, all these experiments, we have another town that is flooding. We'll get into more details of that again in just a second, but it says here more than 60 evacuated from the Lancaster apartment complex due to flooding. No injuries reported, right? This is happening in Columbus, Ohio. Dozens of people are getting flooded out. It's every week, every few days, there's a new city or town that's experiencing these flash floodings where people are getting trapped, right? What is going on? Why is this happening? And we know that they are doing these cloud seeding experiments openly, right? These states, a lot of them have their own programs. Like Texas, they have an entire state program for this. Check this out for Columbus, Ohio.
Update on your 10 weather impact forecast in just a minute. But first, we are following breaking news this evening of an active water rescue underway right now at a Lancaster apartment complex. 10 TV's Kristen McFarland joins us live now. Kristen, you've been out there for a bit now. How much water have you seen around that building?
Colin, lots and lots of water, and multiple crews just wrapped up assisting here at this apartment complex. I want to show you just how high those floodwaters are. Take a look at these cars right there,
Columbus,
almost
Ohio.
completely submerged in water. In the past hour, the dive team brought boats in to get people out of their apartments and send them to the Fairfield Medical Center for shelter. I've seen pets and young children carried out of homes. Officials tell me 60 to 70 people were brought out of homes. I caught up with people gathered around the scene about the terrifying moments they were told to evacuate.
Like, I didn't know that it could flood that much. I thought, okay, it's just minor flood. No, we came back and this is it.
Are you worried about anything in your house being damaged?
I'm not worried about anything except my animals, honestly. I care more for my animals than my belongings.
Now, I just spoke with officials minutes ago. They tell me it's unclear when those residents will be able to go back into their homes. Right now, it's a crazy scene out here with multiple agencies responding to multiple floodwaters in the area. Officials do urge if you come up on high waters, do not drive through them, but turn around. For now, reporting live in Lancaster, Kristen McFarland, 10 TV News.
All right, so that's what's going on in Lancaster right now, in Columbus. And these are like 100-year floods, 1,000-year floods that are happening. These are not typical, these are not normal, and they're happening all over the place every single week. What actually is going on, right? And why are they able to do these experiments on our weather? We're not sure exactly what the long-term consequences of these things are, and it seems like whatever they're doing, it seems amplified, or it's happening more frequently. All right, let me know what you think. But these programs are happening, but they're in secret, and they don't want people to panic because they know if they actually told everyone, hey, we're actually going to create this 3,900 square mile blob of cloud off the coast of California near San Francisco, I'm sure a lot of people would be worried. And what does this do for the marine life? What does this do for the phytoplankton, right, that depend on sunlight, that are actually the basis, like almost the lowest form of food in the food chain for the ocean? And actually whales even eat them, right? Like some of the biggest whales eat this phytoplankton, right? They just eat a ton of it, and algae, and it needs sunlight to be produced, okay? And it also messes with things like the acidity and the alkalinity of the ocean waters as well too. These chemicals that they're spraying, things like sulfur dioxide that they admittedly spray, and who knows actually what else they're doing, because they don't even tell the government. How do they think they could do this giant program and not even tell the government about it at all? So that's concerning too. What are they actually doing? What are they actually even releasing? What chemicals are actually even going into the air? It's pretty unregulated. Nobody actually knows. And what is this doing to the fish? These phytoplankton are the basis of the food chain, right? This is the smallest fish eat it and the biggest fish eat it. and then the bigger fish eat those fish, right? It's literally the basis of the food chain is these algae and planktons that depend on sunlight to be produced, right? And warmth in the ocean. So it messes with that. It also, sulfur dioxide creates acid rain. Okay? It's when sulfur dioxide mixes with water and sunlight, it creates acid rain in the atmosphere. So that stuff is going to eventually end up in the ocean. That's my point here. Whatever they're spraying in the atmosphere, sulfur dioxide, these different salts or chemicals, it is eventually going to end up in the ocean or on land. And they have acidifying properties. Okay, they make acid rain and they lower the pH of waters and soils, which creates problem for these microorganisms as well too. All right, the bacteria and the plankton, algae are very sensitive to pH levels, and if they get to out of range of normal, anywhere from like 5 to 7, or if it gets anywhere out of that pH range typically, then there will be issues with their growth because they cannot absorb the proper nutrients when the pH levels are out of whack, right? It locks out things like phosphorus and nitrogen, which they need. So all these things are an issue, major issue, and it's completely unregulated, and they don't really know what they're doing either. Right? It's all experimental. And what if this 3,900 square mile blob that they create eventually drifts over lands, right? Or drifts somewhere where they don't want it to be. And they were even saying potentially off the coast of Africa they were going to create this thing. And a lot of times the winds from Africa blow westward towards South America and the US. That's why we always get these like weird dust storms randomly, apparently. Sometimes they're a little suspicious, but sometimes we do get these dust storms from places like the Sahara Desert. And that's because there's a westward wind that is blowing, and a lot of like storm systems and things like that will actually come from that area and region too. So that's probably why they were manipulating potentially in that region, because it could blow towards North America, South America, Central America, right? So just insane and dystopian what they're doing. And they're really like pulling the curtain back. Okay, we've really been pulling the curtain back the past few years, especially on a lot of these weird things where it's like we've all seen it been going on. We've seen this stuff. We've seen this weird stuff in the skies. Let me get my phone here. All right, I've been taking pictures of all this stuff that's been in the skies because I've seen cloud seeding or stratospheric aerosol injections, solar radiation management, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I've been seeing these things going on. All right, and it's happening. Okay, look at these pictures here. Let me make it full screen so you guys can see a little better here. All right, look at this. Do you see? So these lines here, those are not natural lines. Okay, these super straight lines do not exist in nature, and especially in cloud formations. And you can see the lines everywhere, and the lines are going into this big globule cloud here. Okay, which was essentially blocking out the sun. The sun was kind of like over here, I guess, and then the clouds were there, and you can even see how the clouds kind of lit up, blocking out the sun. And they were spraying, everything's backwards that I'm looking on here, so they were spraying over here, and then all that was kind of like turning into this weird, like these really thin clouds here, and then it would eventually drift into the big formation over here and become a part of that. Right, this stuff's, it's happening all over the place, right? Those are not natural lines in clouds, right? I will argue that till the end that that's what this is. You can see more lines. Look at all these lines here, okay? They're everywhere. and then they eventually turn into like this smog almost, and then it accumulates together and it blocks out the sun. You see this? Okay, so it's happening, and multiple states have banned these practices as well too. They have banned cloud seeding and any type of weather manipulation, but people even reporting like places like Florida where it's banned, that they're still seeing things happen potentially, right? So it's kind of hard to regulate. And Florida actually passed a law recently too to force airports and pilots to report any geoengineering, cloud seeding, or weather manipulation that they think they are seeing in the areas. All right, so even airports are being forced by state law to report geoengineering. So this is a good thing because there needs to be some type of enforcement, but then there needs to be a way to stop it too. There needs to be fines or even potentially more if the companies do not stop and listen to orders, right? And there needs to be a way to identify these planes. Some of them are even drones. There was this one cloud seeding CEO guy that was admitting that they use drones and planes in combination, right? So a lot of times you're seeing these things happening, they're drones, and they're not going to show up on a typical flight radar website or anything like that, public type of radar, where you can track and trace and see what the plane is and who owns it and the number for it. But a lot of times you will see aircraft and there's no tracking for it. There's no tracing for it on these radar flight apps. And that means typically it's either a drone or it's potentially even the military doing it, and they have their transponders turned off because nobody else is allowed or supposed to be allowed to fly without transponders. But we also know that these companies are doing things behind the scenes sketchily and shadily and doing what they want, right here, quietly planned a test to dim the sunlight. It's like they really think people are just dumb, and they think they're just going to do what they want to do. All right, but we're not. We know what they're doing. We can see it. It's out in the open, and we're going to get it shut down. This experiment got shut down, but this is just one of their experiments, all right? You can see here there's a section that says growing calls for regulation. It says solar geoengineering encompasses a suite of hypothetical technologies and processes for reducing global warming by reflecting sunlight away from the earth that is largely unregulated at the federal level. The two most researched approaches include releasing sulfate particles like sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere or spraying saltwater aerosols over the ocean. And actually a lot of ships, even commercial ships, have these salts put into their gas, all right? And it actually, they've been doing this for decades, and it releases these salts into the air that's supposed to, quote, brighten the clouds, all right? This is happening all over the place. They're doing this stuff. And it says here, but critics of the technologies warn that they could also disrupt weather patterns, potentially affecting farm yields, wildlife, and people. Even if they succeed in cooling the climate, temperatures could spike upward if the processes are abruptly shut down before countries have transitioned away from burning planet-warming fossil fuels, an outcome described as experts as, quote, termination shock, right? That was a very, propagandized little sentence here. Like, they took something that people are actually worried about. Okay, we're worried about farm yields, wildlife, people, and then they made it, they're like, well, but we need it, right? Because things are, well, you know what? This experimentation can actually make things hotter too, because it can actually create a heat dome effect, a greenhouse effect. So remember greenhouse gases we used to always hear about? Sulfur dioxide is a greenhouse gas. These, quote, sulfur particles they just mentioned are released is a, quote, greenhouse gas that traps heat. All right, so these blankets that they create to actually block the sun, well, all the heat underneath it is also not being released. okay? Because that light that's reflected back, it actually goes out into the atmosphere and then eventually out into space, right? And a lot of it is released as heat. But now that heat is trapped underneath this blanket here, and we can get heat dome type scenarios too, where it could potentially even be even hotter underneath where they're blocking out the sun in certain scenarios, right? Not all the time, but certain scenarios it could even be hotter. So they don't even know what they're doing. And they're really just playing God at this point with the weather and affecting everyone. It's uncalled for, and it needs to be shut down. And it also says here, even people like Lieutenant General Mike Flynn, who was a former NSA advisor for Trump, he's even saying that potentially this is related, all right? These geoengineering weather events and these tragedies that are happening, and even people in Congress like Rep. Marjorie Greene, right? So it's gaining momentum, right? Just a couple years ago when I made a video on this, it was people were not as interested, right? But it's becoming more mainstream, and people are catching on that this is actually happening, right? I'm not saying every event is related, every tragedy is connected, right? I'm not saying that to some type of cloud seeding or geoengineering, but maybe some instances are, and it needs to be looked into, and there needs to be a stop on it until we investigate all these things and figure out exactly what even happened the past few years. Because I'm worried there's potentially dozens of these instances of places like North Carolina, Texas. I'm not saying these ones directly are, but like them, where maybe cloud seeding was involved or did happen in the time frame of these storms or these floods, and potentially there needs to be accountability, and people need to pay these families money for their homes that were destroyed, right? Potentially, even if it's only 10 or 20% increase, which that's what they admit to at least, and I think they can even potentially do more than that if they have days to work on a system, then it's still a ton of extra water. It still had effects potentially, and they need to pay up, and there potentially needs to be like lawsuits for this. So it says here 575 scientists have also called for a ban on geoengineering development because, quote, it cannot be governed globally in a fair, inclusive, and effective manner. It's true. This is affecting other countries too. When we cloud seed in one state, it affects the other states. When we cloud seed in one country, it affects the other countries around it, right? And this is happening around the world. So it says here that also Florida signed a ban last month for injection or release of these chemicals in the atmosphere, quote, for the express purpose of affecting the temperature, weather, climate, or intensity of sunlight. So there is pushback. Keep talking about it. Keep sharing your experiences with this. I wanted to get this out because this is important and people need to know. All right. So thank you guys. Hope you are staying safe, staying prepared out there. I hope you have big blessings for your life, your family, and I hope you have a big old blessed day.